All right. Welcome, everybody, to Cracking the Rich Code podcast. I'm your host, Pete Beskis. And with me today is, again, one of our awesome authors, Hilke Faber. Hilke, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here and good to be with you all today.
That's awesome. Well, why don't you tell right now, you are an author in our current upcoming volume 13. Your chapter is called Connecting This Quotient, Committing to What is Most Important to You. Now, tell us a little bit, before we dive into your chapter and everything else, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got here. Let everyone know kind of who you are, what you're about.
Sounds good to me. So I was born in the Netherlands on a farm, and I always start there because it gave me a deep sense of commitment. You know, the cows don't like to wait to be milked every day; they need to be milked twice a day, and it gives me a sense of like, okay, there's stuff that needs to happen. I ended up as a strategy consultant in New York City, where I worked for almost 20 years, and at some point something hit me. It's like, no, there's something else. I'm on this rat race and this is not it. So I almost became a monk. I did a lot of contemplation and meditation, which I've been doing a lot throughout my life. And I became very curious about what is it like when you connect a little bit more deeply and go beyond the surface mind into what actually lies beyond, which tends to be something about peace and care and love and wisdom. And so I almost ran into the cloister and said, "Look, that's it." Decided not to do that because I realized that was an escape for me in some way. And about 20 years ago, decided to become a coach and a team development person. So that's what I've been doing for those last 20 years. I've worked with large corporations, taught at Columbia Business School, written some books also called Taming Your Crocodiles, and now contributing a chapter to Cracking the Rich Code, which I'm excited about. And I work day to day with leaders and teams connecting to what's most important to them and helping to get out of all the conditioned mind stuff that tends to get in the way of that, often having to do with fear, obsession, control, judgment, and those kinds of things.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm already formulating a bunch of questions in my head because it's an interesting topic to dive into. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about, the chapter that you wrote, why that message was important to you to deliver.
So it came to me at the beginning of COVID. I fly around a lot for my work, and suddenly I was sitting in this chair where I'm sitting right now today after having flown a lot this week. And I had a lot more time, and I was thinking, what is this work about that I've been doing for those past almost 2 decades? And I'm almost turning 50. That was a few years ago, so I turned that corner. And it's like, yeah, it's about helping leaders to become wiser, more compassionate, those kinds of things. But in the end, it all comes down to this one thing, which is how deeply are we connected to what's most important to us? And there's so much distraction that goes on, so much worry and fear that tends to drive us to places that have nothing to do with how we really want to live our lives. So I thought beyond EQ, emotional quotient, which Daniel Goleman introduced in the 60s, I thought there's another intelligence which we can call connectedness, which is how deeply are we connected to ourselves, to our values, to our presence, to what's true about us, to each other, and to what we're here to do, our purpose. And so that's what I dedicated my work to at the beginning of COVID. I switched a bit of my work into that area, you could say I focused it. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years. And then the opportunity came to contribute something to this book. And I felt that that's what I wanted to write about because that's what our work is about. That's what my life is about.
Hmm. So with the people that you work with and through your experience, where do we take the first misstep? Or, like what is the first or I guess most important thing to be deconditioning?
Uh, I think the first thing is to become aware that we're living a story. That whatever our mind tells us, this ongoing stream of things that shows up in our minds 24/7, is just a stream of thoughts and not to be taken too seriously. It's like, oh, okay, there's that there, and that thought, these thoughts show up in all kinds of ways. So the first thing is just to become aware that we're in a story, and the first misstep is to be so enamored or maybe so completely absorbed, obsessed by our story that we don't know how to get out of it.
So, you know, I think we all work with different people and expose different situations where, you know, that story is the fabric of our being. It's our essence. It's how we define ourselves. How do you start by unraveling, pulling that first thread out?
To me, the question, I like the Dr. Phil question, how is that working for you? Right?
Yeah,
Because
that's a good one.
reality tends to have a way to hold up a mirror. So I work a lot with leaders in businesses, in large corporations, big tech companies, other companies, and you know, we don't start off this esoteric. We start off with saying, okay, so what is it that you'd like to achieve in your culture and your team, right? And often we define a series of from tos. Let's say, very simple, going from silos to collaboration, very common one, or from being on mute, not being authentic, to actually speaking our truth freely, right? That. And then the question becomes, so how are we going to make this happen, right? And we can make that decision to make that happen, but that by itself will not do anything. We have to actually look a little deeper and ask ourselves, why am I working in silos? Why am I unmuting? Why am I on mute? Why am I doing these things? And that is driven, from my perspective, by how we see things, how connected we are, or how disconnected we are. And so when we unhook from the story, you could say, we say, oh, I'm in silos, working in silos because I'm living in a story that somehow when I do things by myself, I'm going to be more successful. Is that
That makes
true?
a lot of sense. One thing that I've noticed though too, and this is something from you know that I see of people in teams and in you know at home, everything else. We like to tell ourselves a story, but our actions betray that story.
Ah,
How
I
does
get
that
you.
show up in your work?
So it's funny that in the last decade, becoming empathetic and compassionate has become more fashionable, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think of a senior leader uh, who says they want to be kind. Okay, well, what does that mean, right? So then the next thing that happens is we are in a meeting and this person is talking down on somebody or cutting a person off or becoming so empathetic that they don't speak their truth anymore, which is kind of idiot empathy, right? So we're not being authentic anymore. We're not really serving the person because I'm not even saying what I'm really seeing. So how can I be of service to this person if I'm not really saying what I'm saying? So it's often that we as humans and leaders have these ideas of who we should be, but then we don't take it in. It stays more at the discussion level. It doesn't go in, it doesn't go in. Like we need to sort of sit with that. It's like, huh. Like I think about myself. Like I can talk about others until the cows come home. But you know, I also want to be kind and loving. Well, am I always kind and loving? No. Uh, First of all, not to myself. You know, I tend to overwork. Well, what's the story that causes me to overwork? You know, um, and that has something to do with if I stop working, then uh, I'm of no value.
Yeah,
I
that
can't be loved.
that
And
resonates a lot, I think, with a lot of people, right? It's the I'm not of value if I'm not doing something. And it really speaks to our hustle culture, our productivity mindsets.
yeah, all that stuff, all that stuff. So then the question for me is like, okay, so is that who you want to be? So to me, underneath this is a deep commitment this is why I call it committing to what's most important to you.
Mhm.
To taking ourselves and putting ourselves on our seat and say, what is most important to you? Not what you've been told, because these are all stories, like the tribal stories, the family stories, the whatever stories. These are all stories. But what's really important, and listen deeply to what is most important.
No, and I think that's critically important, especially in our current environment where so many things are in our eyeballs and in our ears 24/7 that really aren't that important, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, what are we
But
doing?
yeah, and this kind of even goes back because I'm curious. I've worked in corporate for, many years. I've run teams, been a leader, been, that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because it's something I've noticed as a theme too, right? Like, you talk about leading people, and if it doesn't matter if you're a business owner or if you're in a corporate setting or if you're a coach, when you're there, and this kind of goes back, I'm going to kind of go back to that topic of, we espouse these core values. How do you show people that they're not living those values, that that it's lip service, not, and especially in when you're working with those kind of corporates, when it's a bottom line driven business.
When I was a bit younger, I would be a lot harsher, you know. As I gotten a little older, um, to me, it's all being very sort of gentle and saying, of course, we're not living our values. How could we?
Mm, I love that. I really like that.
Of course. Yes, yes, we say we want to be team oriented and we want to do what's best for the customer and we want to be a good citizen in the community and all these things. And what drives most people is wanting to keep their job or wanting to make sure they make enough money
Mhm.
or wanting to make sure they're liked. And those things are not trivial, especially in today's world where you know economic stresses are very high in many people. So that's it. There's something real about it, and there's also something sort of the reptilian brain or the ego brain exaggerates this. I call this the crocodile, right? The crocodile saying that the part I call it like, oh, who's talking right now? Is it my wise self, my owl, or my crocodile? Is it my who's talking right now? Which voice am I listening to right now? So that's kind of how I bring awareness by having people, first of all, map out that, of course, we have all these motivations that are also driven by the reality that we live in, driven by lots and lots and lots of conditioning over time, what we've been taught. So how could we not be off our values a lot of the time? How could we not? Would be a miracle if we were not, if we
Mhm.
were in our values. It's like it makes sense, right? So then
Yeah,
it's
because the needs sometimes outweigh the wants in a person's
yes,
mind.
the needs outweigh the commitment. The commitment isn't strong enough, right? So then it's not like, oh, darn, you're not committed enough. Now you can judge yourself for that, which is another crocodilian, reptilian brain motivation to judge yourselves, right? Saying,
Mhm.
oh, or no, of course you're not doing that right now. Now, how could you become a little bit more committed to your values? So to me, it's not black and white, which the reptilian brain thinks that everything is black and white and like I make it or I didn't make. No. How can I become a little bit more kind? A little bit more honest, just a little bit more.
I love that too because it goes back to like something that I love talking about with people. It's like do you allow yourself the opportunity to make a mistake?
Yeah.
Right. I see it with my children. They come back from school and they don't get an A and they're hard on themselves. And, I grew up in the age of where's the other 3%, right?
Yeah.
And I looked at them and and I'm very much a believer of the B work. Like if you're putting effort in, the results will come. And I try to instill that in them, right? But
Yeah.
even you can see it even in these 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, they're beating themselves up with an expectation of perfection.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like,
So
it,
what is your take on perfectionism then? That trying to, you know, do something once and have it not fail or not go wrong.
There was a song that I heard this week, something along the lines of Windy Road. I can't remember who sang it, but I heard it right. I think it was in an airport somewhere. I heard it. It's like, oh yeah. Right. So I see the three blockers of connectedness, which I also talk about in Cracking the Rich Code in this chapter, as obsession, judgment, and control, which all have to do with some kind of expectation of perfection that we have, right? Of ourselves. Like, I have to show up perfectly, la 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 la. You have to show up this way, whatever it is. You have to get an A for me to like you. You have to act like I could be judging you. Pete has to ask me the right questions. That's what the crocodilian brain could do. Completely disconnecting from you that way, right? And from myself and from presence. Control, having an idea of this is the perfect outcome that I want. Or this is the outcome I want and everything else is wrong.
Mhm.
And just notice what it feels like when we are in that expectation mind gobbledygook. It's contracting. It takes us out of our beingness. It's like it locks our consciousness into a little island, and we're disconnecting from the presence, from the awareness, from the sky of awareness that we are. So that's how I think about perfection. It's like a little trip, which sometimes can take a lifetime of expectation.
I love that it's like expectation. I always thought expectation just leads to disappointment. And that's what I've had to learn in my more advanced years is the expectation always leads to disappointment. One thing I've also and tell me what your thoughts are on this too with perfection. Perfection, I always see it as a fear to start as well. Like it gives us opportunities to not do something because we will self-sabotage ahead of time. What's your take on that?
Goes back to the song, The Windy Road. You know, uh, if I am totally thinking, like I'm working on a new project today, right? And I'm in the beginning of it, and I haven't done something like this before. And this is happening for me right now on a Friday. This is happening, right? And I can feel my inner judge thinking, doing constant evaluation. Are you there yet? Do you like it yet? Is it going to be good enough? La 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 la. And that is actually a very demotivating mind stream. It's like having somebody beat up on me the
Mm-hmm.
whole time. Well, because I've done that before, over time I learned that I'm not going to start anything because who wants to be faced with the judge? Like I'd rather, take a walk or do something where the judge doesn't have as much to say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to facing the judge and saying, huh, that's you, crocodile, talking to me. I understand, little one, that you learned this. Of course, you're trying to protect me. I got you. I got bigger plans.
And that's interesting too. Like you talked about the crocodile, but that you're trying to help me. I think, in this identification and then learning to tame that voice, at first, we see it as a villain, like someone who's trying to attack us. And, you use the crocodile analogy. But, as we start to learn more about that voice and have real empathy towards it, we start to see that voice as our protector and we don't have to let it out. It's almost like, appreciating that part of our psyche and consciousness as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you bring that out as protection, protection, and any strength overused becomes a weakness, right?
Hmm.
So I love that you're saying we can work with the protection but don't become a protectionist, right? So, and realize, oh, there's these voices that say, you can't do this today. Okay, well, what's the most constructive message I can take from that? Maybe that's, I'm going to do my best. Um, I'm going to give this some time to ripen before I share it with the world, right? All of those things. There's kind of wisdom in there.
It is, and I keep thinking of this analogy, of the mama bear. If you've ever, I don't know if you have children or not, but I always watch, how my wife reacts to certain situations where it's the perceived threat of things, and her instinct is to go and collect them, right, and insulate them from the danger.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how when you talk about the crocodile in my head, I'm like, yeah, it's like a mother's love is very protective, right? And I always see my role as being able to say, no, you got to let them expose them to a little danger, not a lot of danger, a little danger.
Yeah.
And when I start a project, or if I'm faced with something that's scary and it makes me want to cringe back, I the voice that I now create in my head is, you could get hurt and that's okay. You won't die. Like, it's just trying to mentally
Yeah.
coach myself to say that, yes, like, this is scary. Yes, this is new. Yes, you will fail, but there's something good, like, that's something important in that. And just like I encourage my children to leave the nest and go scrape their knee, go get hit in the face with a ball, like, all of those things.
Yes.
Yes, it will hurt. I know it will,
Yeah.
but it'll make you stronger. And it's
Yeah.
important. Otherwise, you are insulated too much. And I think we've gotten to this point where, especially as we get older, and I don't know, see that if you see this in your experience, I find that as we get older, we become so risk averse,
Hmm.
and we like to tell others to take that risk. And then again, it goes back to the value, and we're not acting in that same vein of value.
Yeah. Yeah. Become so risk averse. It's it's often said that rich people are the most greedy. And it's almost like as we get older, and I know this with myself, there's a voice, I'm 52, that says, well, by now you should. And then I try to hold on to things,
Mm-hmm.
people, possessions, achievements, and I don't try out as much if I listen to that voice. I think of another person that who I got to know when she was like 94. Her name is Jean White. She lived until about 100. So I was with her for about 6 years that I knew as a friend. She was the president of the Global Child Nutrition Foundation. She traveled all around the world and coached. I think she started that work when she was 70. And this woman would say things like, Elka, I don't know what I'm going to learn today, but I'm so excited about it because I got so much to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me a whole different perspective on how we can live life, where there's no uh, achievement, or like we set up all these goals, right? Retirement plans and possessions and grades and friends that we need to have and followers and all. Like, yeah, that all stuff holds us back.
It's interesting. It's something that I've witnessed too, because I try to look to see what are the qualities of the people that are older than me that I really value, and that it keeps them young and keeps them vibrant and keeps them engaged. And curiosity, and you nailed it, is one of those qualities. I keep thinking about what is the opposite. What's the quality? What's the thing as humans as we get older we don't hold on to? And I think curiosity is one of them. At first, I used to think it was fear, right? Like, but I realized it's not. It's apathy. Apathy is the opposite to curiosity. And it's the one thing, like, as I get older and I notice that, why don't I want to do something? It has nothing to do with that I'm afraid to do it. It's just too much effort.
Mm.
right?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's just too
Well,
much effort. It's not worth the effort.
yeah. Well, I think also there's something I appreciate that, and I think there's also something about when we get older, it makes sense that our curiosity shifts, right? So when I'm 20, I might be curious about my new mate
Mhm.
or where I'm going to live or what I'm going to do or these very important things that are important then. When I get a little older and the path towards death starts to become more into view, it's like, oh, wait, I'm 52. Maybe I make it another 50 years. I'm seem to be sort of at the 50 and maybe over the 50% mark. I become curious about what's really important to me. And I develop almost like a willingness to let go of interest in things that actually they're not that important to me anymore. So I think
Mhm.
maybe that's a healthy way that our curiosity shifts. And I think that we shut ourselves off. We disconnect from ourselves uh, when and we shut off that life force of curiosity when we think we know or when we think we should know or we think we are there already. Something like that.
Yeah. How does that layer into the connectedness? Like when you try to make people aware of being committed, to what's important to them and reaffirming that year after year, decade after decade. How does that show up when you're working with people to try to get them to reconnect there and
Yeah.
open up their minds?
So to me, it's about, first of all, figuring out what are the parts of them that hold them back. So what are there's a beautiful saying by Michelangelo, who was once asked, how did you make this beautiful statue that later became David? Right? And he said, I saw an angel in the stone and I carved to set it free. To me, a lot of this work is removing the rocks,
Hmm.
stone. So when I work with leaders or teams, we often go into, so, okay, what are the froms to? So what are the froms? What are these patterns that we are in that actually we do, but actually we don't do, we don't want to do anymore? That like so we develop a curiosity about what we don't want to do anymore, right? And we become curious about understanding where it is, and we develop some strategies like breathing, self-talk to let them go. And a lot of that has to do with fear. All these things are disconnecting us, right? And then we don't stay there because then it's the question about what helps you to reconnect or connect deeper to what's most important to you. And to me, those three pointers to that are truth, love, and service. Truthful, like what is true about you? Like what are your real values? Like let me think about this example of creating something new today, right? So my truth is that I being present is important to me. Being truthful, loving, and of service is important to me. So that if I'm connected to that, then those crocodilian voices have far less power. It's like, no, wait, come back here, like that. Love. How much in tune am I with the people that I'm actually working with or serving for? How much am I able to be in their shoes? And of how much are we being of service here? So we connected it. Basically, we discuss those questions, and that starts to emerge different answers.
Yeah, no, each one of those answers is unique to an individual, and it's critical to have these conversations with each person to
Yes.
uncover that because it is a web that overlaps. Like what's important to me isn't important to you, but we could find that commonality along the
Yeah.
way.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. So tell me, Hilke, what drew you to becoming a collaborator in the Cracking Rich Code?
Ha. So I saw what drew me. Somebody approached me. Somebody approached me and said, "We like what you do." And uh, truth be told, when I first saw the word rich, I was like, "Oh, I'm not quite sure that this is for me." And then I got on the phone with Jim Britt, and that sold me. Why did that sell me? Because I found and I felt from him a sense of ease, not complicated, not too much in his head, a sense of a real passion and desire to be of service, to help people advance and progress to what we actually want. So I felt the resonance with that. And so that's why I decided to contribute to this volume.
That's amazing. Now I've seen you in a couple of the masterminds or the last one. Tell me, with the mastermind group, what have you, seen gotten out of that so far? Like what's your impressions of it so far?
In the East, they have this beautiful word called Sangha, community. Uh, community. Now, doing this work of helping leaders and teams evolve to the next level can be sometimes a little lonely, even if I'm part of a company that, my company is called Growth Leaders Network, and we're a couple of facilitators in the Netherlands here in the US. It still can be pretty lonely because, often I start a workshop and often by myself. And then, the energy starts building and we connect and the connectedness quotient goes up and it's great, right? And there's always that time before. I find the times in between workshops actually the hardest
Mhm.
because that's where I get to be faced with myself, and I get to, well, get ready for what's next. And I found that being in the community group of the Cracking the Rich Code, the mastermind group, I found like, oh no, we're fellow practitioners. And I love the vulnerability. I love that not everybody now, most people don't come in saying, "Oh, I've got it figured out. Here's my solution." I I hear many people coming in saying, "Hey, here's my challenge. Can you help with that?" I think that's beautiful. Sense of vulnerability.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really appreciate about the group is the vulnerability and the connectedness. You nailed it, I think, when you said that there are these, you're connected with your clients, you're connected with the people you work with, but when they're done, when the work's done, you're kind of now in another cycle. For my own, this is a personal question that I'm very fascinated with. What do you do in the letdown phase after one of those events?
I love what you call the letdown phase, Pete. Because, yeah, there's a lot of energy that comes
Yeah.
available after a workshop, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow,
And
it's
you put so much of yourself into it. And that's why I can see it as a that's why how it feels to me. It's always a letdown. Like I
yeah,
do it, I'm like, this is so good. I helped so many people. This was so fantastic. And then the next day it kind of feels like a hangover, but it's not, not like a drinking hangover, but definitely like a letdown. Like
yeah.
you feel like you've kind of given a piece of yourself out. So what do you do? And yes, coach me up on this because it's an experience I think we all feel, all of us who do present and do give pieces of ourselves out there. In your
Yeah.
experience, how do you fill up after? How do you work through that?
One thing is to, during the workshop or doing whatever is happening, to stay very present to Hilka. Those I stay present to the group, coaches, teams, whatever they are, and I stay present to me. So I keep nourishing myself, also just the Hilka self by taking good care of drinking and food and breaks. I always take walks because these workshops often are a couple of days, and then I always make sure I talk to people on breaks. I also take some time for myself during the break. So I kind of make sure that my inner equilibrium stays what stays within me. Like I keep some sense of equilibrium. And still there's a letdown afterwards. I feel that too. the first thing for me is just to accept it. It's like, okay, of course, this sale has been catching a lot of wind for a day, a couple of days. So it's going to feel a little stretched. So let it like give it time to recover. So I'm intentional about recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Spend some time in nature, do some yoga, make sure I don't schedule the next day full with calls. Um, that's when I'm at my best. Now, I don't do this all the time. And when I don't do it, the weekend comes around and I go down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate your insights on that. I think that rest and recovery and intentional recovery is something that I think is valuable for all of us. Like, I think that you know that giving feeling that we have where we want to be out, we get energized by it.
Yeah.
So many of us feed off of that. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
But it's that being cognizant of that letdown and being able to take care of yourself after, kind of practice what we preach as well, right?
Yes.
And to the speaking, our audience are our cracking the rich code and future cracking the rich code people. And this is why I think it's so critical to share our experiences and share our thoughts and how do we best support each other so that we can then go support other people.
Beautifully said. That's beautifully said. I think that sense of support for each other is I'm always shy to ask for it. And then when I've asked for it, I'm so happy that I did.
Yeah.
So happy
Yeah.
that I did.
And it goes back to that, adage of like the who, not the how. Dan Sullivan's concept of, when we are building something big, there are other people who want to contribute, they want to help, they want to propel your message forward. And you never know who that person is going to be, but you're never going to reach that person if you don't voice it and you don't share and you don't ask the questions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So just gonna take a quick little interlude here. I just want to add, for anyone who's listening, anyone who's watching, if you are a thought leader, a coach, someone who has a big idea and wants to be a collaborator in Cracking the Rich Code, volume 15 is open right now. So anybody who's interested, you can email me. My email address is on the screen here, pete@bestlisconsulting.com. I will get you connected with Jim. We would love to have you as a collaborator, as part of the network. Our network is growing. We're going to be at over 300 people by the end of the year. This is all other, coaches, thought leaders from different avenues, different walks of life, different stories. It's an amazing group. I've gotten so much out of being part of this group, interfacing with great guys like Hilka, Jim, obviously, some people like, chatting with me even, and it's great. Excuse me. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great, I think, place to be and to position yourself in. So if you are interested, volume 15 we're taking names right now. So please reach out. Hilka, before we kind of wrap up today, what's something that we didn't really touch on that you really are passionate about?
Yes. The urgency and the importance of doing this work. And I mean not the work specifically with me, the work of connecting to what's most important. However, one does that. Like, it doesn't matter to me how people do it. It's that we do it because I see that in our current state of evolution, the human egoic consciousness has created so much trouble. I can think about ecological degradation and wars and division and judgment. We're about to go into election season here in the US. It's a mess. It's a freaking mess. And I think the first thing for me is to go to the place of, yes, of course. Of course, this is what the separate ego mind creates. We can see it on the news, we can see it in our streets, we can see it in our world, we can see it now in nature and climate. We can see that separation consciousness, being disconnected, is not free. Right? It may even cause the humans to go into extinction. It's a possibility. And I hear more and more people say these days, no, I do not want to have kids for the reasons that I just mentioned. And that was unthinkable when I was 20. Like, at least I heard very few people. I was very much with many people in the grow more, better, contribute, excel, and it's going to take care of itself. No. We've gotten to a place of no. And I think it's time for us to look inside of ourselves and ask ourselves, what is truly most important to me? Can I afford to collude with the consensus consciousness, which is getting us nowhere, without any judgment, but saying, hey, wherever I am, corporate leader, team leader, person that is the head of a family, being a brother or a sister, being a friend, how can I show up today that contributes more to the world that I really want, but probably has a far less, what we now think is common greed, hatred, judgment, and waste in it, and far more care and truthfulness, patience, wisdom in it. We are capable of it. I think we're as humans, we're operating at a fraction of our potential. And that's why I think like what you do, Pete, and what Jim does, and what all these Cracking the Rich Code authors do, and which I think anybody who listens to this kind of stuff does in some way, even by listening, is of life importance.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think that is a great place to end this because, where do we go from there? We could, it's really set that example. And, the philosophy I try to absorb, and I learned this from my coaches, was be an example of what's possible. Start there. Start with yourself. And, I think if you're listening and you're interested, pick up the Cracking the Rich Code, read Hilke's volume on connectedness quotient, like how to become better connected with yourself. I think it's a message that everyone should read and hear and propagate. So thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it, Hilke.
You're very welcome, and thank you for your excellent questions. I had a lot of fun in the conversation with you, Pete.
Hey, my pleasure. We'll see you at the next mastermind.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, everybody. Till next